He looked at my hard hat like it was a costume. That was the first thing I noticed about him. Not the tailored coat, not the security detail trailing 2 steps behind, but the way his eyes moved over me and decided before I'd said a single word that I wasn't worth taking seriously. He'd already signed the demolition papers. I found that out 5 minutes into the meeting from a city council aide who slid the file across the table like she was handing me a live wire. The building in question was a century-old textile hall downtown, brick and iron and hand-carved stone, the kind of architecture nobody builds anymore because nobody has the patience for it. He wanted it gone. He wanted 40 stories of glass in its place with his name across the top in letters big enough to see from the interstate. I'd been brought in as an independent structural historian, hired by the council at the 11th hour after a preservation group threatened a lawsuit that could stall his groundbreaking by a year. I wasn't supposed to matter. I was supposed to walk through, sign off on the report his team had already drafted, and disappear. He made that expectation very clear within the first 60 seconds of meeting me. "I appreciate the council covering their bases," he said, not quite looking at me, already looking past me to his assistant, "but I don't think we need to slow things down over a formality." "I haven't looked at the building yet, so I can't tell you if it's a formality." That got his attention, just for a second, long enough for me to see the calculation behind his eyes, the quick recalibration of a man used to people agreeing with him before he finished his sentence. "Of course," he said in the tone people use when they've already decided the conversation is over. "Take your time." He didn't mean it. I could tell by the way he checked his watch before I'd even opened my bag. I spent the next 4 days inside that building with a flashlight, a laser level, and a stack of archival drawings I'd requested from the Historical Society. Everyone on his team assumed I'd find nothing, that I'd write my report, collect my fee, and let the wrecking ball do the rest. What I found instead was a load-bearing iron frame forged in a foundry that had closed in 1911, structurally sound enough to support another 100 years, hidden behind decades of cosmetic damage that made the building look far worse than it actually was. I also found something else. Buried in his own engineering team's internal memos, accidentally left in a shared folder I wasn't supposed to have access to, a flagged inspection note about the new tower's foundation plan, a soil displacement issue near the old building's original footings, unresolved, unescalated, sitting quietly in a file nobody wanted to open 2 weeks before a groundbreaking ceremony that half the city's investors were flying in to attend. I didn't say anything about it yet. I wasn't sure it was mine to say. What I did say in my official report was that the textile hall could be preserved, that demolition wasn't structurally necessary. It was a preference, his preference. He did not take it well. "You're telling the council a 100-year-old warehouse is more important than 400 jobs and a billion-dollar development?" he said, standing in the doorway of the small office they'd given me, arms crossed like he was daring the walls to defend themselves. "I'm telling them the building is safe to preserve. What they build around it is their decision, not mine." "You don't understand how this works." "I understand exactly how this works. I've spent 12 years watching men say a building can't be saved when you mean you don't want to spend the money saving it." Something shifted in his face, not anger exactly, surprise maybe, that I hadn't flinched. He tried other tactics after that, a phone call to the council chair questioning my credentials, a leaked comment to a local reporter suggesting the so-called preservation expert had a conflict of interest, which he knew wasn't true and which he knew wasn't true, a meeting where his lawyer sat beside him and suggested very politely that my report might need revision before it went public. I didn't revise it. I told them exactly what I told him. He started showing up at the site more often after that. I told myself it was because he was trying to intimidate me into folding. Looking back, I think some small part of him had started watching me the way you watch someone doing something you don't understand and can't stop noticing. It was on a Thursday, 11 days before his groundbreaking ceremony, that I finally said something about the file I'd found. He was on site, arguing with his project manager about scaffolding placement, when I walked up and asked if I could speak to him privately. He looked annoyed. He came anyway. "Your foundation plan for the tower has an unresolved soil displacement flag," I said. "Section footings near the north wall of this building. It's dated 3 weeks ago. I don't think your team has closed it out." He stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. "How would you have access to that?" "I didn't go looking for it. It was in a shared folder attached to the historical survey data. I almost didn't open it. I'm glad I did." If this is some kind of leverage, it's not leverage. It's an engineering flag that could put your entire flagship project on the news for the wrong reason in 11 days. I'm telling you because collapsing scaffolding kills people, and I'd rather you check it and be angry at me than not check it at all. He didn't say thank you, not that day. He turned around and walked straight into a 2-hour closed-door meeting with his structural team, and by that evening, 3 engineers had confirmed what I'd found, a genuine, unaddressed risk that could have compromised the foundation of the tower and quite possibly ended in a headline no amount of money could undo. He came to find me after. It was dark. Most of the crew had gone home. He stood in the doorway of the site office, hands in his pockets, looking for the first time since I'd met him like a person instead of a brand. "You could have let that happen," he said quietly. "I gave you every reason to let it happen." "I know. Why didn't you?" "Because I don't build my integrity around how people treat me. I build it around what's true. You didn't earn that for me. It's just who I am." He didn't have a comeback for that. For once, he didn't try to find one. The days after that were different. Not soft, not easy. He was still the kind of man who negotiated in his sleep, but different. He started asking questions instead of issuing statements. He sat in on my walkthroughs and actually listened when I explained why a hairline crack in a keystone told a 100-year story about how the building had settled. He offered, more than once, to make it worth my while to consult on the tower project full-time, at a number that would have made most people's decision for them. I turned it down, not because the number was wrong, but because I understood by then exactly what he was really offering, a version of gratitude that still expected me to orbit him. 2 days before the groundbreaking, he asked if I'd have dinner with him. Not a business dinner, he was clear about that, in his own clumsy, unpracticed way, like a man who commanded rooms for a living but had never once had to ask for something he wasn't guaranteed to get. I told him no. "Can I ask why?" he said, and for the first time there was no armor in the question. "Because I need you to understand something. I didn't save your project to become part of your story. I did it because it was right, and because I'm capable, and because those 2 things don't need your permission or your gratitude to be true. If you ever want to know me, really know me, it can't start with you deciding I'm impressive enough to deserve your attention. It has to start with you already believing I deserved it before I proved anything to you at all." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, like something had finally clicked into place after resisting him for weeks. The groundbreaking happened on schedule. The tower rose eventually exactly as tall as he'd always intended. But the textile hall stood beside it, restored, its ironwork exposed and honored instead of hidden, its name etched in a small brass plaque near the entrance that read not his name but mine, beside the words, "Preserved through the integrity of independent review." I didn't take the consulting job. I didn't take the dinner. I went back to my quiet work of walking through old buildings other people had already given up on, finding the parts still worth saving. I heard he kept the plaque even after people told him he could have it changed. I heard he started asking different questions before every demolition after that. questions he never bothered asking before he met me. I never gave him the chance to make me part of his skyline. I didn't need to be. Until almost a year later, a single envelope arrived at my office with no note inside, just a photograph of the textile hall, lit up at night, standing exactly as it always should have. And on the back, in handwriting I recognized from a dozen site reports he'd once tried to overrule, were 7 words that finally told me he understood everything I'd been trying to say all along.